What's going on, boys and girls, and welcome to another edition of the American Hotspur here on Stateside Footy. I'm your host, Steve Silver, and joining me today is an incredibly talented voice in the Tottenham Hotspur community, in person and here on YouTube. Listen, man, the work that he's doing with Change at Tottenham is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't noticed, there is a nice little groundswell. Joining me today is going to be Billie T. Good afternoon, Billie. How you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Lovely to be talking to you. And busy weekend, I'm sure, for everybody involved at Tottenham. We've got a match, we've got a transfer window, and all kinds of news is coming out at the moment, isn't it, about Daniel Levy and all sorts. So busy weekend, I'm sure.
That's the beautiful part about the schedule that I keep, because here's the thing. I would love to be able to come on here and do this 7 days a week. Thankfully, I have a job that kind of takes away like more than 3/4 of my week, so I can just kind of focus on the weekends, and all of the headlines that come on a Monday, Tuesday. By the time I actually get here on YouTube, it's already 3 days old and I don't have to deal with it because, listen, we had a nice little win in the Champions League, and I think that was the overriding feeling as we come into this weekend. All of that negativity seems to be a little bit for the birds right now, but I don't know. It is what it is. But by the way, as we get into the show, I want to start off with you real quick about what you made of that performance in the Champions League, because I got to be honest with you, as much as it was a very good win and a very good result, it pissed me off to the nth degree, and I will tell you why. Because there's no correlation between our form in the Champions League and the Premier League. And it almost has this weird feeling of what we saw last year, Billie, where it was, you knew exactly by the time February rolled around, you knew exactly what the plan was. They were focusing on European play, and the Premier League was exactly that. And you're kind of relying on the three teams that were going down to kind of keep us above the relegation line. And, luckily it worked out for us last year where we didn't go down. This year, there seems to be a lot of nuance within the Premier League, and I don't necessarily feel like this is the right year to be kind of taking that chance. But it almost has the feel where the players and maybe even Thomas Frank are kind of in that boat where it's like, that's really still a competition where we can win. Whereas the Premier League, we're sitting in 14th place.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, it was a great performance. I think, it's probably the first time in a while where we've controlled an entire match. It felt like most of our Premier League matches, we seem to be able to control one half and not the other. But it is frustrating because the sort of performances that we're given in this competition are vastly different to the ones that we're seeing in the Premier League. And I think in comparison to last season, I think everyone knew, and obviously we were literally bookies' favourites to win the Europa League.
Correct.
I can't see a world, and as the most optimistic fan in the world, would imagine that there's not really much chance for us winning the Champions League. The quality of teams is just far too high. At best, I think we could possibly, if we got down to the quarterfinals, semi-finals, or something like that. I mean, you see the draw already that we're faced with. We'd have to play sort of, we're looking at possibly playing Barcelona in the quarters or something like that. So it's not really a realistic competition that we can win. So it's baffling, really, that they're sort of paying less attention to the Premier League. And I think, when you look at our fixtures that we've got coming up in February, we were obviously just talking off air about some of them that are coming up. And the fact that West Ham have gone 2 consecutive wins, Nottingham Forest are picking up form. I think the priority should lie with the Premier League because, I've been saying that, I think it's crazy that we're talking about this 2 consecutive years for a club like Tottenham Hotspur is mad. But relegation is staring us in the face if we don't act. And I'm not saying that, we're likely to go down or anything like that, but I think the prospect of it is something which has to be faced by the club.
I think I'm in the minority, Billie, when I say that. I think relegation is actually going to be a positive for this club because, for whatever reason, for as long as ENIC has been around, I think they've used that excuse of we're too big to fail. That for sure. Yeah, for sure. Where it's like, we'll have stretches where we'll be a top 4 team, and even in those stretches where we're mid-table, we're still just going to be good enough where we can still continue to operate. And when you look at the fact that in England they're the 3rd or 4th most profitable team in the Premier League when it comes to worldwide revenue, as of last year they were the 9th largest team in terms of revenue. So this club absolutely prints money, and when you just look at their model of how they do business, it almost feels like it's just kind of business as usual, whereas a relegation would actually force ENIC to clear house, but also I think it also terms if there are fans that have no idea what Enoch are actually made of, because they've never actually had their backs against the wall. A relegation would absolutely force them either to A, sell the club, or B, actually get their shit together and actually act like the big club that we actually are. And maybe I'm in the minority here, but what was interesting about it is you look at a club like Aston Villa, where they went down 6 years ago when we were in the Champions League final. They were down in the Championship. 6 years later, they're in a better position than us in the Premier League. And it almost feels like that relegation that they suffered a couple of years back was actually kind of a good thing moving forward, because they were able to get their situation straight. And then you look at what Unai Emery has been for that club, and you see the successes that they've had over the course of the last 3 or 4 seasons. I would probably assume that even Villa fans will have to admit that maybe that relegation was something that they absolutely needed.
Yeah, and I think what's certainly true is that they need a wake-up call. I think they're sleepwalking at the moment, and I think our transfer window is certainly not reflecting the crisis that we're in. I mean, Thomas Frank literally said it himself today that our squad is weaker now than it was at the beginning of January. And that is totally unacceptable. And I know we're going to talk about the protests later, but that is, a significant reason why fans are so angry at the moment is because, we were promised that this new, and I always am reticent to use the word new because, the bare bones of it is it's the same owners essentially. But this new direction that Tottenham are allegedly heading in is supposed to be one of ambition, and they keep quoting things about they're going to put the football team first and things like that. But right now we haven't seen any evidence to support that. In January, we've made one decent signing in Conor Gallagher, but essentially that's just replacing Bentancur. And when the manager is coming out in, what is the date today? It's literally February on Sunday, isn't it? Transfer window closes on Monday, and saying that the squad is weaker, and the manager said that publicly and admitting that, it just shows the sort of the ambition or lack thereof that we've seen this window. And it's baffling, really, that no one at the club seems to be taking this relegation threat seriously when, I know we're 8 points clear of it at the moment, but if anyone can look at our fixtures in February and our recent form in the Premier League and think, where are the points going to come from at the moment? Now, our next game is Man City, then Man United, then after that we've got Newcastle and Arsenal. If we lose all 4 of those, we're going to be dragged down into it. So the club, they need a massive wake-up call. And I'm just surprised at being such a crisis of form again in January. We haven't seen them react to it yet at all.
By the way, the thought of dropping the next 4 in the Premier League is so absolutely real that it absolutely bugs me, because I'll be in London in 3 weeks, and I'll be catching the tail end of that 4-game stretch against Arsenal. And the thought and the reality of the fact that, had Ruben Amorim been still with Manchester United, there's a possibility that we possibly could go up to Old Trafford and steal 3. But that being said, it's like that team is completely different. And, I guess it just depends on which Newcastle side shows up. But there's a real possibility that we drop all 4, and any goodwill that we've gotten over these last 2 Champions League victories, all of a sudden, all of that goes out the window, and we're going to be back to square one talking about it. Quickly before I move on, please do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because we just rounded 400 and we are pushing to 500, and I'd like to get there before the end of the season. So please hook your boy up with a nice little like and subscribe. Billie, I do want to talk about this guy real quick, because we were talking about ambition, and it seems like this came out just a couple days ago. Raheem Sterling was released off his contract, and Spurs are one of 8 teams that are checking in and kicking the tires on a guy like Raheem Sterling. And you mentioned ambition, and I think this kind of points to exactly what you were talking about, the type of ambition that this club is absolutely looking for, or the type of ambition that they currently are employing versus where you and I think we should be in the actual market. Now, obviously, they've checked in with Jan Diomande. He has said no. They've checked in with Magnus Akalushe, and it's not that he says no. It's just, Monaco's in that position where I don't think there's going to be enough time for them to actually replace a guy like Akalushe. So that type of deal is probably more going to be a summer deal. Whereas now you got a guy like Raheem Sterling, and I know a lot of Spurs fans are kind of like, well, listen, that's a hell no. Considering the 2 clubs that he's essentially is coming from, or his last 2 clubs where he's come are both of our London rivals. But that being said, I'm kind of in the situation where, Billie, I don't think beggars can be choosers. And maybe that's just my, maybe that's just the American in me, but I just look at it like, I understand the January window probably better than most. And it's like, I understand that those type of players, those upper echelon players, most likely are not going to be available. And if they are, we're not the type of team that's going to attract those type of players. So, the Magnus Akaluches or the Chris Smiths are the type of players that realistic we're going to be able to get. But that being said, it's all dependent on whether or not those teams are going to be able to replace those players. But now you have a guy like Raheem Sterling. And by the way, we have an absolute need on the left-hand side. The question is, A, how much does he have left on the tank? And number two, realistically, what does that look like in a Tottenham Hotspur uniform? But the reality is it's like, I don't know, man. I would probably look at this as an opportunity than the fact that he's played for Arsenal and Chelsea. I don't necessarily care about that. He's a professional. And who knows exactly what he's going to be able to bring. You would think that he's going to be playing with a chip on his shoulder. I don't know. Maybe I'm in the minority here. I feel like if he's available and you can bring him in for the rest of the season, considering we're still in the Champions League, I don't know. It might be worth it to kick the tires.
I just think we're at the point, and that the phrase that you use there is the one which in the situation that reflects the situation that we're in the best, and that beggars can't be choosers. I think, if you'd have gone into the beginning of January and said, should we sign Raheem Sterling? I think all Spurs fans would have said no chance. I think, when we were sort of promised this long-term ambition, and you look at the interesting quotes from Thomas Frank today, where he said, we did try and get Semenyo. That shows what the new owners are trying, but that's a £70 million transfer, and then there's been around 3 weeks have transpired since then, and there's been nothing really on the table of that kind of level. And the players that you mentioned, in Diamande, Akliouche, that would sort of really show long-term ambition about players that would come in and sort of set the position there for a good 5, 6, 7 years. And Raheem Sterling is obviously not that. He's more of a sort of stopgap panic signing, and I think the fact that we are, we're 2 days left in the transfer window, 2 full days, and there's a match in one of those as well, suggests that they're sort of scrambling and around. And I think that we're in a situation now, particularly a couple of hours after Dane Scarlett going as well. And don't forget, Dane Scarlett has made appearances in the last 2 games that we played. Where we're desperate. Like at this point, I just want a body in. We need a body in. It's a bit like last January we saw this as well with Timo Werner, which obviously was a transfer which didn't particularly pay off long term or short term really. But we're just at that same situation that we usually seem to find ourselves in January, where we're shopping around on deadline day and we're just desperate now. So, I'm against the sort of signing of Raheem Sterling in terms of long term and things like that, but I'm at the point now where I just want a signing of someone that we have to get more bodies in here. We're in a crisis. We're in an injury crisis still. We're losing. I think Thomas Frank said today we've lost 8 players in January. It's obscene what we're seeing. So at the point where I'll take anyone at this point. Do you know what I mean?
I do, and that's the thing is I would tend to agree with you at the start of this transfer window. If you would have said Raheem Sterling, I would have said no, because I would have assumed that we would have came into the transfer window with a plan, where we would have had plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, and then if all else fails, then you have Raheem Sterling. But certainly you would actually have
plan Z, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You would assume that guys like Johan Lang and would actually have a plan. Like I don't necessarily think that Fabio Paratici was a big part of this window. Maybe as a secondary just to try to sell, but really I really believe that Johan Lang is leading the charge in this window. And me personally, I've never liked Johan Lang. Sure, he can bring in a talented youngster, but when you're actually looking for the type of guy that is going to make an impact, I don't think he has the wherewithal or the ability to accurately sell this club. And even if we were to overspend, they're probably going to be like, if there's an opportunity between Liverpool or Tottenham or City or Tottenham or even PSG or Tottenham, whatever the case may be, we're not going to be the first choice. And so from that standpoint, there's a reason why we're looking at Magnus Akaluche and Jan Diamande and Chris Smith and some of these other type of players. But that being said, you're absolutely right. We absolutely need a forward player through the door. And that being said, it's like, if this is what's possible and this is what's realistic, it's better to have them. Like I always say, it's like better to have them and absolutely not need them than to not have him at all and then risk another injury, because at the very least you got him. And whatever he's able to give you for the rest of the season, that's fine, because I don't think this is going to be a long-term commitment.
Yeah, and I just think it's interesting that the left wing position in particular is one that Frank has sort of stumbled over the whole season. I think if you sort of list the players that have played there, and Tell, Odegaard, Richarlison has played there, Bergvall has played there, Muani has played there, Xavi Simons has played there. He's never really settled on a solid left winger. I think Odegaard for me personally anyway, and obviously Kudos at the beginning of the season nailed down that right wing position. I think Odegaard has pretty much in Kudus' absence nailed down that right wing position as well with some good performances lately. But the left wing is just wide open, like.
Correct.
I don't think Thomas Frank has settled on a left winger. Obviously, he's tried to put Jed Spence there even in the last few games. So it's a glaring hole in the squad. And I just think it's a shame that, the sort of names that we are linked with at the beginning of the transfer window or the beginning of summer, people like Savinho and Akliouche. I'm a massive, huge fan of Akliouche. And
I do too. I am too.
I just think, and obviously Semenyo was talked about. I don't think Semenyo is realistic in January because every big club wanted him. But I just feel like, I feel like it would have been needed at this point to sign one of those ambitious names, and then Tottenham go and sign Akliouche in January. You're suddenly thinking maybe this is a different ownership, maybe this is a new direction. Signing such a talented young player that most teams in Europe would be after, or maybe this is a new era for Tottenham. But at the same now we're sort of scrambling along for the same, and it's exactly what we did the last couple of transfer windows where we signed Dan Juma in January 2 years ago, and then Werner in January a couple of years ago as well, and it's just the same repeated mistakes that we continue to make.
I know it sounds crazy, but yeah, that seems to be on par with the ambition of this club at the moment. Where
cool.
It was actually kind of nice when Conor Gallagher came through the door because I think he kind of checked a lot of boxes for Spurs fans. He's right in the middle of his prime, plays a position of need. And he was willing to come back. And I think from that standpoint, when you think about the leadership, he checks a lot of boxes. I think a lot of people after that were like, okay, well, he can't be the only one. Like, it can't just be Sousa and Gallagher and that's it. And then, of course, we were kind of, I don't know, like I was kind of excited to see exactly who was going to be the next because we were expecting a forward player, and then it was Andy Robinson.
Yeah, and exactly. I think obviously there has been a slight change in direction because we do seem to be targeting players with a bit more experiences, which is what fans have been calling for. I just feel like in this instance, how much is Sterling's experience really going to? Because he hasn't started 2 consecutive Premier League games since February 2024. So he's he had a really bad loan at Arsenal where he had barely any impact. So I just kind of feel like I'd rather sign. I think experience is one of those things that's quite intangible sometimes, isn't it? I'd rather sign a quality player than just sign someone who's older just for the sake of, we need some experienced players. I don't think that really amounts to anything tangible sometimes.
I would agree. I look at this club's ambition and it makes absolutely no sense to me. They've tried to rebrand into ENIC 2.0. We've heard Vinny Ben Contestion come out and say that, he wants to wipe the slate clean and all these good things. And yet words say one thing and actions speak another. And I understand, dude, the January window is a window to, I guess you could say, replace and replenish. Obviously, you don't necessarily want to look at this window as somebody where you're trying to plug holes because theoretically speaking, in January, you shouldn't be this injured. You're looking at this to add maybe a piece or two so you can kind of finish off that second half run. And in the summer, you use the summer window, to replace and to add building block type pieces. So I understand it from that standpoint. But that being said, it's like one of the things that bugged me about it was the fact that a guy like Antoine Semenyo says, yeah, that's cute. Tottenham, that's cute. It wasn't even. It was an afterthought. It wasn't even serious, right? And for me, it's like the ambition. He did, wasn't
it? He immediately rejected us before talking to any of the other clubs.
Well, but you also look back in the summer and you see Morgan Gibbs-White, you see Eberechi Eze, and now it's Antoine Semenyo. Some of the better players that are in the Premier League that looked at Tottenham and was like, yeah, okay, fine. That's look at you guys trying to flex, and it's like it was going to take Spurs to say, listen. Here's what we're going to do. Not only are we going to meet your transfer fee, but we're actually going to pump this up to 250,000 pounds a week, 275, and literally come over the top and give them a contract where it actually forces them to think.
Exactly.
Wait a second. They're not just talking about breaking their transfer strategy or their transfer records by a couple thousands. It's by 25, 50,000 pounds a week, something so aggressive where it's yeah, it's an overpay. but we have to shed this reputation of us being, a cheap ass club in the global market.
And I think that's a huge point. And I think, what often gets labeled by our own fans and other people with, this kind of idea that, well, why would anyone want to join Tottenham at the moment? Because they're in a crisis. Why would anyone? And the fact is, footballers are quite simple beings. They follow the money in generally. And you look at teams like Man United, had a terrible season last season. I know Man United also have the reputation of being Man United, but they had a terrible season last season. And then in summer, they go and sign Cunha and Buemo and Sesko. Yep. And, Chelsea finished 16th, 15th, 14th when they go and sign players. The fact is, it's great to tell a player a story and say, right, don't worry, Tottenham are not going to be like this. We're going to be ambitious. We're going to do this, this, and this. Essentially, though, you just put £300,000 in front of a footballer. They're going to say, actually, all right, I don't really care about the ambition thing. I'll just take the money. Right. And we have to talk. And we're not in a position at the moment. When we had Pochettino and we were sort of vying for Champions League every single season and in title races, there was no shortage of players that wanted to join us. Now we can't really sell them that kind of, if you come here, you're going to be playing for the Champions League, you're going to be going for the title every year. You've got an amazing manager who's going to do this, this and this. So we have to let the money talk at the moment. And that's something which we've never really done under these owners.
Can I ask you how much Thomas Frank plays against that? Right? Because you would assume that agents and players talk around the league.
Yeah,
and we've heard nothing but negative things coming out of the Tottenham Hotspur camp. Where I think, as a matter of fact, Matisse Tell, and I don't necessarily know if this was true, but it was definitely reported that Matisse Tell wants out unless Thomas Frank gets sacked. And I don't know if that was a direct quote, but that being said, I looked at it and was like, ooh. Like we're not talking Harry Kane, we're talking Matisse Tell of all players. But that being said, I'm curious if the coach that's in place plays against the potential ambition of what this club is actually trying to do.
I think it's definitely possible, and I think if you look at, you only have to take Mickey van der Ven as a case study. I think back in the summer and back in even early parts of the season. Yeah, someone in the chat there, Iceman, said the same. Like if Van der Ven would. There's strongly rumours that we're offering him a new contract and he's happy to renew. A couple of months down the line, his body language is all over the place. He seems to be angry at everything that we do. And, now he's sort of linked with a move away, and the sort of conversation around a new contract seems to have dissipated. So I think it's very likely that Thomas Frank, at the same time, I would also say, though, that, I think anyone with a sort of a crystal ball eye on the future, I think it's difficult to imagine Thomas Frank being here long term at the moment. So I'm sure both players and prospective players are probably thinking, if I sign there now, if I ride it out for a couple of months, he'll probably be gone anyway, and then they might have a new manager in the summer. So I don't think many players will be joining at the moment. Conor Gallagher, for example, I think players and their agents probably are aware of the situation that Thomas Frank right now is sort of going game by game by game and could go at any minute. And I think. And I've always thought that the biggest motivator in all of these things is always the wages, really. And I think, and I think in the example that you cited there, I think it's a real shame, because I really like Mattis Tell, and I think one of Frank's biggest negatives for me is his treatment of Tell. I think he did get the decision right in the Champions League. You can't argue with that, because Solanke scores twice in a row, but then he dropped in for the next Premier League game. He's been in that team, and I can understand why Mattis Tell in particular is frustrated. But hopefully when the next manager comes along, as he says himself, it'll be a new era for him.
It's going to be interesting too, because there's a certain manager that's going to be available right after the World Cup.
Your fellow countryman at the moment.
Our American by way of Argentina, absolutely. And it's not Christian Romero, although it would be interesting to see what his mindset would be if his manager is his fellow Argentinian. That would be interesting.
I'm sure, and that would be a match made in heaven, right? I'm sure they're match made
in heaven. Him or even Marcelo Bielsa, which would be interesting, but I don't think I don't think he's coming. But anyways, this upcoming.
Let me ask really quickly. Sorry, just
go ahead.
Sorry, just why it popped into my head. In America and among American fans, is it kind of accepted, the idea that Poch is probably going to go after the World Cup? Is that like a common trail of thought, or is it like we want to keep him beyond that?
I think there is a subset that feels that if Mauricio Pochettino leads this team to an area of the World Cup where we've never been, I think there's going to be fans that would love to see him back for his full cycle. But that being said, I think it's unrealistic, just considering that the contract itself is only for 18 months, and I've seen his contract, and the reality is, yeah, it's only through World Cup 2026. But there are provisions of the contract that if he wants to stay, then the U.S. Soccer Federation has the first right to negotiate with him. Yeah. But that being said, he can also sign a pre-contract, just like any free, right? Yeah. Where it's like we're a player that has 6 months left and he hasn't moved. Teams can actually sign him to a pre-contract. So as soon as the season's over, he becomes their property, but he can't move until the end of the season. Yeah. It's the exact same thing. So if Spurs wanted Mauricio Pochettino, all he has to do is let his intentions be known that he's not going to stay. And Spurs can actually negotiate a contract, but unfortunately the U.S. Soccer Federation cannot deliver until after the World Cup has ended. So that's when he would be able to come back. But I mean, again, it's like, you're going to be coming in at 1st of August. So you realistically only have about 3 weeks until the start of the season. So it might be a little hectic, but
and I'm sure because obviously you guys are hosting it as well, I'm sure out of respect, I don't think Pochettino is going to be negotiating before. I'm sure his entire focus is going to be on the World Cup, just because it's such a big deal for America, I guess.
I think what you're going to see is it's probably not going to happen until May, because one of the things that I think Mauricio Pochettino would like is his next job to begin immediately. You know what I mean? Where it's like he doesn't want to waste 2 weeks negotiating a contract, because it's 2 weeks that you don't have until the start of the Premier League season starts, right? So I would probably assume that as we get closer to the World Cup, that probably will happen. But he's not. There's no way he's leaving either before or during that's not going to happen. Poch is not that type of guy, but I want to talk about the Saturday, because one of the things that I'm curiously optimistic to find out is if this team can carry over their form into the Premier League. I think we've seen this now for a year and a half, Billy, where it's like you get into, like we've seen it in Europe, where all of a sudden all the problems that ail this team when it comes to their Premier League form, all of a sudden in the Champions League, they look absolutely brilliant. And maybe it's just because they're playing teams that they know for a fact they could beat. And then they get back into the Premier League, and then all of a sudden it's back to Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Now all of a sudden this weekend we get Manchester City. And of course, I think we're a bogey team for City. We seem to actually have their number, whether we're at home or whether we're going up north. But that being said, I don't necessarily look at tomorrow as is going to be an easy walk, because Manchester City seems like a team that is currently right in their midseason form. They look like they're on the cusp of actually making a move and potentially try to climb the ladder, because Arsenal are complete bottle jobs. But that being said, it's like I don't look at this as an easy task tomorrow. I don't necessarily think that the whole bogey thing is going to play a role in tomorrow at all.
No, I don't either. And the reason is I just think if you the attacking talent that Man City have at the moment is insane. Like, obviously Marmoush has come back from AFCON now. He started again in the midweek, and Haaland has been a bit out of form in terms of goals, but then he scored in the midweek as well. And I think Cherki has been one of the best players this season, and amazing. And then you add Semenyo to that. Semenyo is probably going to tear us apart for the third time this season. It'll be the third time that we played against him. He's scored in both games so far, so I'm sure he'll be happy to do that again. I think it's a bridge too far, and I think the weird hold that we have over Man City, I think, this season in particular, that performance is one of probably our best in the Premier League this season, and we haven't really seen it. We haven't really seen it again since. So it's seemed much more of an outlier than usual. And I think, if you look at last week as a case study, played fine, brilliant against Dortmund in the first half. Great game. Obviously, we had 10 men, so we could relax a little bit in the second half and sort of see the game out professionally. And then we just have a horror performance against Burnley, particularly in the second half, where, we let one of the worst Premier League teams almost beat us. There's no consistency going into any of these games. And I think, we
back-to-back, by the way, it was back-to-back Premier League performances against West Ham and Burnley.
Exactly. And if you want to go back, very worst teams.
And if you want to go back another weekend, we did the exact same thing against Sunderland. And
I just think with the personnel that we've got available, when we've had really great performances against Man City last season in particular, we had Kulusevski and Maddison running the show. I don't see anyone at the moment that can do that. Solanke is not fit. He had to obviously couldn't start the game midweek. He'll probably get 60, 70 minutes at best this weekend. but there's just that sort of spark player is just not there because most of them are either injured or, long-term injured like Kulusevski and Madison. So I think this is a real uphill battle. The only thing I would say is, the weird hold that we do have on one of the best football clubs in the world. You never know what's going to happen. It would be very Tottenham to go and beat them on Sunday. And, I know there's the whole argument about Arsenal and Tottenham fans will be happy to lose. But I think at the moment, most Tottenham fans, like we were talking about a while ago, we need to survive at the moment. So I think that's got to take a back burner. And I think, we need to win. So it should be an interesting game. It'll be very, very tough.
Paul Van Beek in the chat says he's got a funny feeling that we're going to beat Man City 2-0 on 2 set piece goals. And I'm like, dude, that's unsustainable. It's don't get me wrong. It's like,
Romero,
by the way,
another Romero goal is what we're hoping for, basically.
Yeah. If Romero and Van de Ven score again, by the way, their value in the global market is exponentially going up. This season hasn't, because of the losses, it hasn't diminished their transfer valuability. As a matter of fact, it's gone through the goddamn roof. Because now all of a sudden they see how valuable they are in the attacking third, and they're like, oh, okay, that's an added bonus. But yeah, no, it's unsustainable. Like, somebody's going to have to step up and actually score goals on that forward line against Manchester City. But I don't necessarily see that one coming at all.
Yeah, and
I'm sorry.
And our forward players are just, that we're really lacking sort of firepower there. I mean, obviously, at the beginning of the season, there was a lot of the talk about, we've lost Son, Kulusevski and Madison are injured. That's sort of like 50 GA that you've got there between those 3 players. And what we've seen as the main story of this season is the players that have brought in to step up, like Oda Bertel, I think are fine young players, but they're just not prolific at all. And we're just, we're really struggling for goals that are not scored by our centre-backs at the moment.
And in the shadow of this match at the stadium is a protest with Change for Tottenham, and I did want to get into this, and I'm going to give you the floor on here and allow you to explain exactly what the protest is this weekend, why you're protesting, and what your expectations are for this protest.
Sure. So I'm just going to go back in time a couple of months, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So obviously, change the sort. I'll be as quick as I can because I know.
Take your time, man. Take your time.
Real, thank you. So obviously, Change for Tottenham last season campaigned against the ownership, and we were joining quite significant numbers on the high road, and then Daniel Levy was removed as chairman. Not necessarily correlation between those two things, but certainly there was pressure put on by the fans, and just to go sort of, big picture stuff, Change for Tottenham is essentially just a group of season ticket holders, a group of fans that want to see change from the owners at this football club. It's just a platform for fans to come together. So going into the season was an interesting one because we've been promised this sort of new era. Vinay was a very high profile securing of a job. We had what was essentially labeled as ENIC 2.0 and the Lewis family and the Tavistock group. They basically seem to a PR stunt to try and distance themselves from being called ENIC anymore. And it was a new era. And, at the beginning of the season, they were promised, particularly when Daniel Levy left, Thomas Frank and Vinay were very keen to constantly say that, the Lewis family are ambitious. They want to put the football team first. They really want to have a go. I think you also have to add the context to that in summer, there were 3 high-profile bids for the club, which were turned down. Tottenham are a publicly traded company, which means that they have to be announced for these kind of things. They turned down 3 bids to buy the football club. And if you're thinking, well, if they don't want to sell the football club, and they're going to keep the reign, then surely they're going to have a go at some point and try and put some money into the football club and try and be successful, which is what they said and which is what they promised. So we, as Change for Tottenham, we kind of thought, well, let's give them the January transfer window to see what they're doing, and then we'll reassess in the summer and see what happens. Obviously, what kind of transpired since was Tottenham found themselves in a regular mess, the same kind of mess which they've been in previously last season, even talk of relegation, being middle of the table, below middle of the table, I should say. And the January transfer window was a huge opportunity for the new owners, the new partnership, Vinay, the new leadership structure to say, well, this is going to be something different now, and we're going to affect that with an ambitious transfer window, which is what they promised as well. And I think very, very quickly, it transpired that ambition and all those promises were simply not there. The promises which they made to invest in the football club not really transpired. We sold our top scorer last season on the first day of the transfer window. We bought in a new player for the same amount, so the net spend is negligible this January, and we got inundated with fans saying, we're angry. We want to protest. We want to protest against this January transfer window. So we decided 2-3 weeks ago now at the in a game to hold a protest then, with the intention of putting pressure on the board to go and spend some money in January. That protest was picked up a lot in the media in England. It was in newspapers, it was on the radio. There were a couple of hundred people that joined us at that protest. We'd like there to have been more, of course, but it was our first one of the season. And this time we had to organize a protest, really, really quickly because we were responding to things that happened in January. Last season, we got to be able to take 6 weeks to organize each protest. This time, we were reacting week by week by week. Since that protest, there's been no more significant signings. Tottenham have lost a number of players to injury. And also, Tottenham are now in a situation where they're actually in the knockout stages of the Champions League. So there's a chance to at least do something for the season. But neither the opportunity to do something in the Champions League or the fact that Tottenham are facing a relegation battle, none of that is reflected in what the board are acting and what they're doing in the transfer window. So we're protesting again because we were promised an ambitious football club and we've not been delivered one. And we will continue to protest. If that takes every home game, so be it. We'll continue to protest until those promises are made. So we're protesting against the Man City. Sorry, that's a little historical overview there, but we are protesting in reflection of the fact that the promises that were made about the January transfer window and the new ambition of the owners has not been reflected in their actions.
And what does the protest consist of as well too? What are you trying to achieve with the with the protest as well too? Is this going to be like a walkout at halftime? What is the objective of this protest? Number one, and then also number two, how did the 2 wins of the Champions League affect this as well too? The win against Dortmund, the win now against Frankfurt midweek, and all of a sudden, you're absolutely right. Now that now we're into the into the round of 16 when it comes to the Champions League. Does that play against anything, or is that still like no, this club is still reactionary, there's no ambition? It's literally one guy goes down and we're trying to replace him and we have no plan. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. So a couple of things about that. Firstly, Change for Tottenham and the Change for Tottenham process are always protests against the owners. We've had a lot of messages this time saying, well, why aren't you guys protesting against Thomas Frank? Or most of our members, myself included, I want to replace Thomas Frank with a new manager. I made no secret of going about that. But Change for Tottenham is looking above Thomas Frank and above the structure of that and thinking, well, Thomas Frank will be the next failing manager that we've had countless of them in the last 10, 15 years. So Change for Tottenham is always in protest for the owners. This specific protest is in relation to the January transfer window. By the time that the protest finishes and the match finishes, there'll be 1 day of the window left. We need significant upgrades in the transfer window in order to improve our football squad. Thomas Frank has come out. The fact that Thomas Frank has come out 2 days before the protest and said the squad is weaker now than it is at the beginning of January, that's unacceptable. So this specific protest is designed in against and in order to hopefully put some pressure for the club to go and do something in January in the limited time that they have left. And the way that this protest works is slightly different to the ones before, because usually we meet outside the stadium and march down the high road. This time we're doing a slightly different tack just because we feel like we've done that quite a considerable number of times in the last 2 years. And so this time we're going to do something inside the stadium, which is something that we've sort of done a little bit before. We've taken banners in the stadium, which we'll be doing again this weekend, but we've never planned anything of this significance before. And this is our first protest where we're going to do a walkout. And now, we've always ummed and ahed about a walkout. So obviously a walkout could be at some point in the game where you're encouraging fans to leave the stadium in like a visual protest that will be on TV. This game is televised in England. I know you guys are lucky you get every football game in the Premier League, but in England we don't. This one is selected for Super Sunday, which is the premium slot in England. Oh, you don't? Which is, I know some countries do, which is the premium slot in England. So there'll be a lot of people watching on TV. So we want to do a visual protest against that will be picked up by the TV cameras and hopefully involve the discussion about the owners. And so we're asking fans to walk out on the 75th minute in this game. Now that is something which we've always been not reluctant to do, but we've always felt we need massive support from fans if we're going to make that successful. The reason why we fast-tracked it this time is because we want to try something different. Now, in our last protest, we had 200 people join us. And, last season, we had 2,000 people join us. So what I'm hoping is that, I'm trying to be realistic as possible. I'm not expecting 50,000 people to walk out at 75 minutes on Sunday. That would be unrealistic. But what we're hoping is by doing this persistently and continually, there might be 10 people that walk out on Sunday. The next one there's 20, then there's 100, then there's 1,000. So this is our first walkout of many that we're going to plan consistently, because we feel like consistent, repeated action against these owners is the only way to make them stand up and listen. So this is the first time we've tried a walkout. The support for it online has been really, really good, and we're hoping that transpires to feet on the ground on Sunday too.
Here in the United States, the Premier League is actually across multiple streaming platforms, and if you don't have them, you're not going to get it. So it's on Peacock, it's on USA, and it's on another one. I think it might be Paramount. I can't remember. Anyway, but that being said, a couple weeks ago, as the final whistle blew against West Ham, and after we dropped that one, there was a gentleman right behind the goal in the south stand that was holding up a yellow sign that said "Change for Tottenham," and I actually thought that was actually a very powerful image right there, because it literally encapsulated the entire process of fans saying you're going to get sacked in the morning, whatever the case may be, the booze, whatever the case may be. Somebody had the wherewithal, as that camera was panning in to that, there it is. There's the "Change for Tottenham" flag, and I thought that was absolutely brilliant. But that being said, I asked you on Twitter, this was maybe a couple days ago, what about just not showing up? And you said something about the season ticket holders, and I was like, yeah, be that as it may, but we're talking for a game. We're not talking for the entire season. Organizing somebody where there is no walkout, we just don't show up. Because and the thought process behind this is if you show up, chances are you're still going to spend money on merchandise, concessions, things like that. And at the end of the day, you're still giving Enoch what they absolutely want, which is your money. By not showing up, essentially that takes away that equation. But also, if they're playing to an empty stadium like they did versus COVID, that sends an even more powerful message that, listen, for as much as you take us for granted, we can actually hurt you as much as you think you're hurting us. And if you do that and you essentially send that message where it's like, dude, we're not going to show up, man. We're not going to sit here and stand for this crap. I'm curious about how has that ever been discussed where you're actually having a reverse boycott and everybody just not show up, period.
It's definitely something which has been discussed at length and something we would love to do in the future. I think what you're seeing this season for the first time since I can remember, and I think personally that's the most powerful form of protest that you can do, is not showing up. Okay.
Yeah.
And for the first time since we've been in the new stadium, fans are starting to do that already. Like the Dortmund game, which is a massive Champions League game. When we played Dortmund with Pochettino, there were 88,000 fans there for Wembley. This time there were 13,000 empty seats against Dortmund, which is unheard of for a team like Tottenham. Man City is on general sale. So I think lots of fans are already starting to do that on their own volition, which is great. We would love to do a boycott, and part of the our messaging inside the stadium is we are asking fans to boycott spend inside the stadium and things like that. But I think to make it really effective and really powerful, we would need huge numbers to do it. So what we're trying to do is maybe build up, with the continuous walkouts, is once we've got X number of fans that we can rely on every week. Now let's step it up further. Let's boycott. So we're hoping to build gradually towards that. Another consideration with the boycott as well is obviously the season tickets, which makes it slightly complicated because obviously a lot of our members are season ticket holders. Most of the people that will join us on Sunday will be season ticket holders. So obviously the financial aspect of that makes it quite tricky because they've technically got our money anyway. But I understand that if you're boycotting still, you're not spending inside the stadium, which is something that we encourage too. And I think that, the visual loss of an empty stadium would be really powerful too. So it's definitely something we would like to, so something to work on in the future. Another consideration that we've always had about boycotting is, for a lot of my members and a lot of our members and a lot of, people like from across the world like yourself, and not just people that are match going fans as well, watching Tottenham is our life. Like, it's our passion, it's our biggest thing. And we'll be doing it long after Enoch have gone, and we were doing it long before Enoch were there in the first place. Like, we don't want the owners to be the ones that are taking that right away from us. So boycotting, gives them the power to say, actually, you're taking away this thing that I absolutely love doing. But I completely agree that it's a really powerful protest and something which we'll definitely look to do in the future.
Yeah, a couple of years ago in the city of Oakland, in the East Bay, the A's owner, John Fisher, who's one of the worst owners in professional American sports, essentially torpedoed a stadium deal that would have kept the A's in Oakland for the long term. And the goal was to, drive down the commitment between the club and the fans so he can actually pull up stakes and move out of Oakland. And he did that. And as soon as that was absolutely known, the fans of Oakland put together a boycott, and they actually boycotted over a 3-game set where nobody showed up. As a matter of fact, for the 3-game set, I think maybe 500 people actually paid to get in over 3 games. Most everybody was outside the stadium, and it drew actually more press for the actual protest than the actual games themselves. And it sent a very powerful statement to say that the fans absolutely do have more power than owners absolutely think that they do have. And when you send that type of message that you're not going to actually feed the kitty, it just kind of reinforces the idea that in fact the fans are actually a very, very important cog in the wheel when it comes to the machinery of football. Before we go, I do want to talk to you a little bit about this because Daniel Levy apparently is selling his shares, and it looks like he's selling his 30% to a Hong Kong businessman, and apparently this businessman actually has had interest in Tottenham Hotspur. I think over the course of the last 10 years-ish, I think that's what it was. And apparently there was a move to potentially buy the entire thing, and of course that was rebuffed. But it looks like Daniel Levy is on a mission to sell his 30%, which would actually throw a wrench into the entire operation. I actually think, because lately the Lewis family quietly, and this is what I heard, that the Lewis family were trying to get Levy to sell them his 30%. And apparently what ended up happening was they were only giving him market value. And of course, Daniel Levy is not an idiot whatsoever. Anybody who thinks he's an idiot clearly has no idea. He understands exactly what 25 years of investment of his life to Tottenham Hotspur is worth. And also his 30%, what it's actually worth on the open market. And he's looking at it like, if this thing sells tomorrow, chances are pretty good that this club will sell for $5 billion, and 30% is going to net me over $1 billion. So if you're prepared to pay at least $1 to 1.5 billion, I'll sell it to you. If not, kick rocks. And now all of a sudden, this Hong Kong billionaire is like, "What's up? Come play ball." You know what I mean? And it looks like that Levy has valued his 30% like roughly just a little over $1 billion, and it looks like this might happen. I guess the question is what does this mean long term for the Lewis family as far as Enoch? Because me personally, I think Spurs are pretty much for sale are pretty much up for sale, not in name, if that makes sense.
Well, firstly, I think obviously this is really breaking news.
Yep.
I'm going to say some things which are speculating completely. And I think this is going to be a story which is going to come. We'll find out more information over the coming days to make the picture a bit clearer. But I think it's really important that anyone who thought Daniel Levy was going to go down quietly, you're kidding yourself. Something like this was always going to happen. I'm completely speculating here, okay? And it goes back to what you're just saying here. I think this is a power play from Daniel to try and either get the Lewis family to match his perceived value of it's been reported in England as £1 billion, which will put the club's value at £3.3 billion, which is, I guess, about $4 or $5 million, right, equivalent. I think either it's a power play to do that, or for him to say, look, I'm not going to take a rubbish deal from you guys just because you're trying to undervalue my assets.
Right.
I've actually got someone else that's going to come pay me the money that I want. And here we go. So I think it's a bit of a two fingers up to the Enoch. And I knew as soon as, the story, the shock that came out that Daniel Levy is not only sacked, but the relationship has soured so badly that he's not in the stadium. We knew that Daniel Levy was never going to go down quietly. It's not his style at all. He's a very, very tough negotiator, an incredibly intelligent businessman. He was never going to take, and we've seen it with transfers over the last 25 years of him being in charge. He's never going to take less money than what he thinks he's owed. That's Daniel Levy to a T. And it's exactly how he's operated at the football club, sometimes to the good, sometimes to the bad. But I think what it is a spanner in the works for the Lewis family, because I think what they would have preferred to do is buy Daniel Levy, dilute his shares, get 100% ownership of the football club, and then be in a strong position to sell it for 100%. The problem is Daniel Levy loses out in that situation, and Daniel Levy does not
Correct.
like to lose out. So something like this was always going to happen. I think it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out in the next few days. I imagine the Lewis family will not be keen for him to sell those shares to another businessman, another consortium of business people from Hong Kong, because that weakens their position. Suddenly you've got, Daniel Levy at the moment is not in a situation where he's influencing anything that happens at Tottenham on a board level because he's been extradited, essentially. Suddenly, if you get a whole new consortium of people involved in the mix, it's going to seriously weaken their position. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. I'm imagining this is a bit of a two fingers up at the Lewis family. But I just think anyone who thought Daniel Levy would happily sell his shares to the Lewis family and be done with all this at a lower price than is expecting, is living in dreamland.
So, Billy, there's an old statement here in the United States, and it is keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. And the reality is, one of the things that I think ENIC failed to do was essentially to keep Daniel Levy in their good graces, because one of the things that it was 100% obvious that they wanted, you're absolutely right, to dilute his shares, to gain full control of it, because when a sale eventually comes down, they're going to be able to reap all the rewards. But one of the things is that Daniel Levy was never going to underbid his 30%. It was just never going to happen. And the interesting thing about this is 30%. And I'm curious, just out of curiosity, how much voting right comes with 30%? As far as voting on the board goes, just out of curiosity.
I'm not sure about that. I'll have to ask my co-presenter Connor, who would know.
Yeah, because if there is voting rights, maybe even not a majority, the last thing I would probably assume is the Lewis family wanting an outside entity that they don't know, they don't trust from Hong Kong being able to even have a minority vote.
Which in itself is made up of multiple people as well, so it makes it even more complicated.
Correct. That's one of the last things. But here's the thing, because it kind of plays to this right here from Iceman 163, who says all we want are owners who want to invest in the club and invest in the squad and bring back our Tottenham. And the thing about this is that if this actually puts the onus on ENIC to have to match, and when you consider the debt that the club is already in, and they're in a considerable amount of debt, what it does is all the talk of ambition, all the talk of wiping the slate clean and doing right by the fans, all that talk goes away, because that's more debt that they're taking on. And in the interim, until that's exactly right. And then what ends up happening is until there is a sale, you're going to wait. That ambition is going to have to wait until a new owner comes in, and that could be 5 years down the road. That could even be 10 years down the road. But the reality is, and I still get the impression that the Lewis family do not want to be in the football business anymore.
Yeah.
I get that impression that they don't, but certain hurdles have to clear in order for them to sell. And I think this is definitely a major hurdle. And I would probably assume I would assume that I think what's going to end up happening is I think they're probably going to match.
I think, we know that Daniel Levy is meticulous in everything that he does. I would personally suggest the timing of this is not an accident. He knows the Lewis family are under serious pressure at the moment from the fans. And, 6 months into their reign, I don't think anyone envisaged they'd be under this much pressure immediately. And I doubt they did either. And I think Daniel Levy is probably just thinking, if I drop this snooze now, that'll add even further pressure at a time when they need to be confident. I think he's done this on purpose to really turn the screw on these guys. And I think they're probably realizing, well, possibly anyway, they've bitten off more than they can chew here, because 6 months into their reign, they are under serious pressure to deliver in a period where Tottenham are not delivering on the pitch. So I think that everything that Daniel Levy does has intention behind it. He's an incredibly meticulous and smart guy. I don't think the timing is accidental. I think he's doing this on purpose because they're under massive pressure at the moment.
It's actually kind of impressive if you take a step back and just look at it for what it is. It's actually kind of impressive.
I think, we probably thought as fans, we've got rid of this guy and, we don't have to think about him anymore. But he obviously has been waiting in the wings with an ace in the hole, and he's finally played his last card, and this is it.
But it is a slippery slope, don't you think, though, right? Because if he forces the Lewis family to the table to cash him out, at a valuation that he perceives is what it's worth. And then they get relegated at the end of the season. Ooh, boy, that's a slippery slope. You know what I mean? Because the value absolutely bottoms out. Good Lord, man.
It's probably that could be a consideration of his as well. It's probably a good it's a good time to short us right now.
All right, we're coming up to the end of the show, and I do want to thank the 2,124 of you guys that are tuning in. I do want to thank those that are tuning in also in the chat as well too. Simon Cohen 5388, Iceman 163, Warren J is in the house. Who else is in the house today? We have Paul Van Beek, Spurs Diehards, TTID. What's up, Adrian? And of course, his show is coming up at 10 o'clock UK shortly. Spurs 1234 ish, AK Shags, Niall O'Connor. All of you guys, I definitely appreciate it. Billy, before we go, is there any last thing that you would like to touch on? Where can folks find you? And what's on deck for you, man?
I just want to say, firstly, thank you. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you, and hopefully the first of many. I'm sure we will meet again online. And if anyone, my primary goal and my primary work at the moment is with Change for Spurs. So if anyone feels, we're not just open to match going fans. We are very, very, happy to be a platform for fans across the world as well, which is why we have people that join us in America and India and Australia and all sorts of corners of the globe. Please look at the Change for Spurs Twitter if you're interested in getting involved. Yep. Because as we've just been speaking about for the last hour, our fans deserve better than this, and hopefully one day we will get a football club that reflects that.
I would like to think so as well too, and of course I do want to let everybody know that this upcoming weekend we do have our Hotspur live stream that happens every single weekend, and of course I believe that's on Sunday, and I do apologize I said Saturday. And we hopefully will have our normal Sunday Spurs conversation with Dermatron from THFC TWD. And of course, I will be on the Irish Hotspur, I believe, on Sunday morning as well, too. So there's plenty of opportunity to talk Spurs this weekend. Please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and also hit the notification bells as well, too.
You have to say hi to the Irish Hotspur guys for me. I'm big friends with those guys. Great guys.
Yeah, dude. Dave is actually one of my favorite people. That dude is amazing. He's one in a million too. And I'm sure you can find Billy T on pretty much most programs in the Spurs YouTube community. And of course, you guys just started a new podcast as well too, right?
Yeah, The Whistle Blows, and that's with my co-host Connor, who's very very clued up about the sort of organizational side of things behind the scenes. We tend to look at the boardroom stuff and sort of review what's going on at Tottenham, and what a time to be doing that right now. There seems to be news coming out every single day at this point, so we'll definitely look. We got a show tomorrow at 8 p.m. UK time where we'll definitely be going into this Daniel Levy bombshell that has dropped.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it, man. I'm going to actually tune in for that one. So that is going to do it for us. Billy, I do want to say thank you for taking the time out today. I know you're a busy dude. And again, I want to thank the 2,173 of you that took the time to drop in today to listen to this conversation. I definitely appreciate it. This is exactly why I do it. And I know that there are some out there that, don't necessarily like an American talking about Spurs. But that being said, man, I've been a Spurs fan for as long as I can remember. And this is my club, whether it's for good or for bad. And, I have opinions on this club, so I'm not afraid to talk about them. And it is what it is. But I'm looking forward to actually being out in London and seeing it for the first time.
What a game you've chosen to come for as well.
I couldn't get out in the White Hart Lane era. Unfortunately, I was married and my kids were young, and I just couldn't get out to London at that point in time. But it's better late than never. And I'm glad I'm going to be able to witness it for the first time. And, I wish that my first North London derby would happen in a year where we are actually competitive or competitive-ish. You know what I mean? When it comes to the Premier League, but still, it's going to be an amazing experience.
Well, you can never predict Tottenham. They can beat anyone on their day, so you never know.
Yeah, you absolutely never know. And of course, if there is a Change for Tottenham protest, I will more than likely also meet up with you guys as well too, and also join that as well too. So it's going to be absolutely excellent. So again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Billy, thank you very much, and you guys enjoy the rest of your weekend. It should be a good one, guys. Take care. Good night. Bye.